Welcome! One of the most delightful pieces in John Williams' great catalogue of music is this piece, Yoda and the Younglings. You might not actually recognize this piece as it is only featured in a brief section of Star Wars Episode 2. The song explores various themes introduced throughout the series as well, so without further ado, let's start the analysis. There's a lot to unpack in this 3.5-minute piece of music. For example, the tempo hovers around 74 beats per minute, and that sometimes fluctuates in each section. Now, more orchestral scores like this one vary in the tempo to avoid sounding written, but more so expressive as if it were not just notes on a page. The song features 7 total sections, so this is where film and video game scores differentiate. Films tend to meander while games are more repetitive. The instruments we have are pretty sparse in terms of how many instruments. We have the woodwinds, which consist of the flute, clarinets, oboe. Then we have the cello pizzicato and harps, which basically play the same thing and double each other. The French horns are present as well, and are basically the only brass instrument that are introduced. The strings ensemble include the cellos and the violins, and later on the double bass. And other instruments are the boy choir and the cymbals, which are only used at the end. The fantastic melody introduced in the woodwinds begin the piece, so let's start there. Now first off, notice how all of the woodwinds are in unison on the same note. And as I play the melody, notice the repetition in these patterns. Again, John Williams repeats this phrase right here in the second measure. And in the single measure, he just repeats the same note. And the melody here uses only the notes of the A major scale. If you're a composer searching for a great melody, I recommend focusing on these two principles: repetition and staying within the key. Think of the cello pizzicato as accenting what the harp plays. In this section though, it only plays half notes. John Williams also secretly mixes this pattern up by including a measure where these half notes are on the offbeat instead. Right there. As a composer, always look for the opportunities to change up the rhythm or other aspect of the song. French horns start off by doubling the harp and pizzicato by using this sustain note to lengthen each half note. And then the second half of this part relies on the use of articulation. The notes sort of swell in rather than begin immediately. All this is possible by switching the key changes on the plugin I used. I instead use some expression automation to replicate this effect. And just before section 2 in the song, there's this nice descending pattern down all the instruments. It first starts in the woodwinds at this end point here. So it first starts in the flute, then the cello pizzicato, and then the clarinet. So here's the entire section by itself. This section is basically devoid of melody and acts more as an atmospheric section. I don't think a detailed explanation of the techniques Williams uses would allow you to appreciate this section. Focus instead on the colors he brings with each instrument. The cellos and the pizzicato provide the low end, the harp provides the counterpoint for the strings, and the woodwinds just fade in on this one note for added color. Violins and cellos take the lead here and give the warmth and homely feel. Again, dynamic expression is most important. String libraries won't do this for you in terms of the dynamic expression. So my method is to record myself playing the part along with a modulation wheel that controls dynamics. This gives a far more emotive sound than just programming notes in on a piano roll. Here's section 2 by itself. Now this theme you'll definitely recognize. This theme is titled Across the Stars, most well known as the love theme from episode 2. This version does a great job of evoking at first sadness but eventually hope and joy near the end. The flute and the oboe play this melody again in unison. Instead of the A major key of before, John Williams shifts the song key to G minor, the reason for the theme's melancholic sound. Again, as I stressed before, there's no real magic or great technique to this melody. Williams's depends on repetition and staying in the key just like any other composer. Although another important aspect of a melody is how to end it, and he chooses to conclude on the dominant of G minor, which is D. Both the French horns and the strings highlight the chords beneath the melody. Each of them stick to only 2 or 3 voices as to not overload the main theme presented in the woodwinds. The cellos, or otherwise the bass of the song, enter a little bit after to catch your attention on the development of the melody. Then at the end of this section, we have another transitional period that features a little horn melody. The reason why this melody feels uplifting is mainly due to the texture of how a French horn sounds by itself. Even though we are still in G minor, the French horns can't be beat in terms of sounding regal and majestic. So here's the entire section by itself. And here we come to Yoda's theme. As can be seen, Williams likes to jump around to different themes or sections, usually based on the scene changes in the movie. Yoda's theme here is also presented in the woodwind section, most prominently though in the clarinets. In fact, the bass clarinet has its own little solo section as an expansion of the melody. and then the bass clarinet. What I like about the melody is how it maneuvers and twists its way around the chord changes. The strings here are amazing and placed in just the right spot to accompany the woodwinds. Let's listen to them soloed. Now the harp plays an interesting role as well. When the strings swell up in dynamic, the harp ascends up also. And then when the strings descend down in dynamic, the harp also descends. It's a nice use of combining both dynamics and actual composition. So here's the entire section by itself. This unique arrangement in the woodwinds is one of John Williams' tricks as a composer. Quite simply, he uses 3 block chords. Here in C, A minor, D major, and then B major right here. Having these 3 block chords shift in modulation so quickly gives it almost an otherworldly emotion to it. Obviously perfect for the Star Wars setting. The high string line here also following the horn line afterwards are pure Star Wars greatness as well. And here's the entire section. Now section 6 changes things up a bit. We only have 3 instruments mostly in this section, the harps, the cello, which basically only holds on this one note, and then the boy choir. The song modulates the B major, and thus you'll see that both the harp and the choir use only the notes involved in B major. There doesn't seem to be any real form or repetition to this particular section. It's more meant to evoke a meditative status as a background piece. A brief section that transitions us from the calming choir of before to a more string-heavy section. For the first time, the double bass arrives to punctuate the low end. We hear yet another familiar Star Wars theme, the Force theme. Even though the Force theme is usually played in a mysterious way most of the time, here it is presented as ominous, which really transitions well to our final section, section 3B, which is a restatement of the Across the Stars theme. the climax point of the song. Octave violins take center stage with an intense interpretation of Across the Stars. Let's take a look at the counterpoint presented in the French horns, the flute, and the harp. In the French horns, we have usually 2 to 3 voices going on at once, and this gives a more regal sound. This is because it plays mostly fifth intervals above the lead melody. And of course, the pinnacle of the song wouldn't be complete without a little harp run. So here's the entire section by itself. Thank you for taking a look with me through one of John Williams' great pieces of work in the Star Wars films. This song, Yoda and the Younglings, combines both the soothing lows as well as the dynamic highs to be very enjoyable to listen to. Thanks for sticking with me and enjoy this recreation of the song, Yoda and the Younglings.